So anyway, well, we're going to move forward, and Christy Glaubke, and so Christy, you're going to talk about your lit review and study, and so come on up here, and then we will have an open forum where questions and answers. Christy's from Children Now, and this is the report. I read it, and I think between these two things here, we've got a start of some quality discourse.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank David for inviting me to be here today. This is kind of the premiere of our research. We aren't doing an official release of it, but I'm very excited to share it with all of you. There's such a great mix of people in this room right now who are involved in developing and sharing children's media that this is the perfect occasion for us to introduce the work. So just a little bit about Children Now. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, Children Now is a nonprofit child advocacy organization based in Oakland, California. I work in Los Angeles, but we do research on children's media. We both do it in-house and commission it with leading academics in the field. And then we use that research to influence national and public policy on children's media, trying to ensure that our media regulations and rules support a healthy media environment for children. And we also use that research to try to reach out to those folks who are creating media for children, to try to provide resources and tools for them, for you, to help you in your quest, in your goals to create quality media for children that's beneficial to them and entertaining, hopefully at the same time. The lit review that we conducted, which as was mentioned, is upstairs. It can also be found on our website if you want to print up some more copies. It was funded by the Packard Foundation. Packard is very involved right now in creating a universal preschool system in California, trying to get publicly funded preschool for all kids in California. And they were very interested in how interactive television specifically might be used in preschool classrooms to educate kids and to try to create kind of a level playing field. They wanted to know if what's upcoming with interactive television can actually be beneficial to students in a preschool setting. So, and kind of following along with that, look at all other types of interactive media as well. So we set out on this quest to look at all the research in this area. We looked back through about 40 years of research on interactive media effects on preschoolers. We stayed kind of specific to preschoolers. And we're surprised to find that there's really not that much research out there. The field is growing. There are some wonderful centers. Warren, you'd asked about people who are doing some great research. There's a whole children's digital media center that's set up at several universities throughout the country where they're doing phenomenal work on this area. But it's fairly new. It's in its infancy. And, it just wasn't quite as much research as we'd hoped to find, but we still were able to find quite a lot of information in that research, and we believe it's enough to really create the beginnings of a good dialogue about what interactive media for preschoolers can look like, what the potential is, and where we can go from here. So in order to kind of supplement the research that we found, we also interviewed academic experts, media executives, advocates, and educational professionals throughout the country, and tried to get their insights and advice on where the technology is, where it's going, and how it can best be used with children. So for those of you who have the report, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about what we found specifically. I will say that because it's not a very deep body of research yet, we were left with quite a few more questions than answers in doing this. But the one thing that came out loud and clear in this research is that kids love media. I don't think anyone in this room would dispute that. They love media, they're using it, as Lisa and Warren both said. You know, what we're trying to do and what we think is so important is figuring out the best way to use that potential to make it a beneficial, enriching experience for children. And as far as preschoolers go, the other thing that's important to know, because there is some debate about this and some dispute, but according to the research, young 4 to 5-year-olds are very capable of using interactive technologies. They know how to point and click a mouse. They know how to turn on a computer. Many of them know how to load a CD-ROM. They're familiar with the technology, they're doing it, and like I said, it's just about figuring out the best way to use it. So I'm going to kind of go backwards through the report a little bit. We looked at the research and kind of came up with what we thought were best practices and recommendations in 3 different areas. One was for the academic world. Where do we need more research in this field? And there's a list in the report that gives some ideas, but is by no means exhaustive. Again, we really just want this to be a starting point, a place to kind of start thinking about where we need to go from here. And for you academics in the audience, please, we would love feedback on that. We'd love to know if you're doing work in this area, if you know of people who are, or where that work is also headed and where it should go. We also included best practices for schools. How are preschool classrooms using the technology successfully, and what are some hopefully fairly simple things that preschool teachers and administrators can do to incorporate technology in their classroom. I'm not going to go into a tremendous amount of detail here about what those findings were, except to say, the report kind of opens up talking about the debate. You know, there is a debate about using technology with young children. Is it good for them? Does it displace other things? Is it taking them away from having that human interaction that they so desperately need, or from playing with manipulatives that are also very important to their learning and development? And what the conclusion I kind of came to in the research was that there are people who feel very strongly that preschoolers should not be using interactive media. Those people and organizations who feel that way primarily, I won't say all of them, but primarily feel that way because there's not enough research yet saying that interactive technologies are beneficial for children. In all of the research that I looked at for the report, I didn't find anything that showed that interactive media was harmful to children. There's quite a bit of research that showed that it may not have had the intended benefits or learning outcomes, but there was nothing that showed that it was harmful to children. But what a lot of advocates and organizations and parents and teachers are concerned about is that there's nothing that proves or actually shows, there's no real proof yet that it's beneficial. And in absence of that, they're kind of playing taking a cautionary role and saying, you know, let's not go hog wild with this interactive technology, let's wait and see what happens. So they're a little more cautionary. They tend to recommend that interactive technologies not be introduced to preschoolers. The other side of that is are organizations and advocates and teachers and parents who believe that the technologies have great potential. And some of the programs, like First 5 California, that are supportive of interactive technologies in classrooms, shared with us some things that they think are beneficial in classrooms. But across the board, the number one message that kind of came out in this regard for classroom use was that teachers need to be involved in it. Just as with home, that the technology shouldn't just be used as a reward for kids to play with after they finish their classwork, or it shouldn't just be left for them to do by themselves, that they do need that parent or teacher interaction that the teacher can provide scaffolding and assessment, and that part of it's very important. So there are many other recommendations in there. I'll kind of leave it at that, but I'm happy to discuss the other recommendations as well. So kind of moving back, what I really wanted to talk more about today was what we found in terms of the effects of interactive media on preschoolers, and some recommendations for those people who are creating interactive media products. As I said before, there really wasn't much, there was no research that found a negative effect of preschoolers using interactive media, but there were some positive effects that they found, and there wasn't a lot of research, but it touched on a lot of different areas of childhood development. So there were findings that using interactive media, and different types of interactive media, we're talking about mostly computer programs, educational CD-ROMs, but also interactive toys, interactive storybooks, mostly things like that. No interactive television yet, really. But that these different programs and products have been found to positively affect preschoolers' social skills and their interaction with peers and their teachers. They found that preschoolers are very capable and able and excited about working on a computer with their classmates, and they collaborate with each other and work cooperatively and follow rules, which is very important. That it increases their motivation to engage in the learning material. Not just playing on the computer is fun, but that they actually like engaging with the learning material and the subject, and that they engage with it for a longer period of time than they do with other types of learning materials. Some products that have been tested on preschool children have been found to improve their verbal communication skills, their literary skills, their writing skills, and their general communication skills. One of the big concerns is that using computers can damage children's creativity, and while there is some research that does show that certain types of programs can harm children's creativity, there's other research that shows that it can improve it and it can support their creativity. So what it all comes down to, and again across the board in this research, the big message, and Lisa touched on this too, is that it's all about the content. It's about how this content is created and provided to children that determines whether or not it's going to support their learning of the material. And the number one recommendation that was offered was that the products need to be both age and developmentally appropriate. And while that sounds kind of commonsensical and, you know, a big duh, it's much bigger than just knowing that preschoolers are learning their alphabet and numbers and shapes and colors. It's much more than just the material that they're learning. It's also how it's presented to them in the context. And we need to keep in mind how preschool children learn. We need to understand that they do learn collaboratively, that they learn very well with their hands and through experimentation and through play. And one of the examples that was given, which I think really struck me, was that you don't want to create, say, an interactive doll that is going to help teach kids how to read. That because children don't play with dolls that way. They don't use dolls to read. They use dolls to play. Some of the most successful products stress the importance of having children be in control of the media, that they need to be able to control the content and be able to go back and look at it. There should be repetition. There should be a simple interface. Otherwise, they turn it off and don't use it. One of the studies found that a lot of kids prefer adult websites because they're more simple than the kids' websites.
Let me just say, I think this is the first study I've ever seen that's actually made that leap to say it's got to be responsive. And then the other thing is that it's just another material. That
Yes.
whether it's linear media, interactive media, whatever, that it's getting to a point where just like you evaluate puzzles and books and the quality of those materials, we have to start looking at interactive and electronic and screen-based media the same way. Is it match the child? Does it fit their level? And those are the questions. And parents actually know a lot more, and teachers, than they think they do about these things because they know developmental level.
Definitely. Definitely. And the last thing, this is what I really want to leave everyone with, is that another recommendation that kind of came out loud and clear in the research was that we need more research. We need to know more about what's going on, and not only with the media product itself, but how children are using it, how they learn from it. Like I said, there are some recommendations for design and integration in the classroom, and hopefully those are a good starting point for this, but this is a much bigger discussion. There's a lot more work to be done, and I just wanted to kind of end this with a call to action to all of you out there, and then for those of you who are doing research, for those of you who are familiar with the research, or working on products and developing products and learning what works best with children within your own companies, we as a community need to figure out a way to share that research with one another, to get our work into the hands of everyone else who's doing work in this field so that this field can grow. And I know Children in the Media and Children Now is working, is trying very hard to do that. I know David is doing a phenomenal job of that as well. And so I encourage you all to make use of us and our resources as well as others, and to please enter into this dialogue and this debate and help us find ways to get that information out so that we can move this field along, really start out on the right foot and develop programming and interactive content that starts by benefiting children. I think it'll serve the industry, I think it'll serve children, I think it'll be a huge relief to parents, and it'll just be a win all around.
So for the journalists in the audience, the release date time is now. This is out.
It's out. It's on our website.
We can now talk about it. So and Christy is the primary author of this. So congratulations.
Thank you.
David?
Let's turn it over to the...
Yeah, have a mic. Oh, you're going to run around. Yes. Do you think anyone might have a question? Yes, we'll start in the back. Just raise your hand. I have to turn back to a teacher again.
I feel like I didn't get a great sense of what some of the core learnings were. You know, you sort of talked about the 3 C's, but didn't really go into what those meant for you and what your sort of overall takeaway was, you know, in terms of the book. So I'd love to dive in a little bit more.
Okay, sure. Yeah, one of the main points of the book is that we can't just talk about early childhood as being one big amorphous thing, and that there's so much change happening between 18 months to 24 months to 30 months to 36 months, that the best learning is going to happen from media that really tries to get at what's going on in a 24-month-old's mind and what do they need, or what is going on in a 30-month-old's mind and what do they need. And I know that's incredibly difficult for an industry that, you know, you have a very broad audience out there, and you can't just say this video is going for kids at 30 months old. You need to give a range, you know. But I think that parents might be well served by knowing what the sweet spot is for a lot of these programs. So certainly giving a range, because all children are different and they're developing at different times, and there's siblings involved, and the household kind of ecology is a totally different thing. But if parents know, oh, you know, this is really made for a child who's at 30 months of age. And for instance, 30 months it turns out to be a very interesting time in a child's understanding of narrative, sequence, story. So some of the researchers who have been looking at this are finding that that's the age at which, and of course it's going to differ by child, but we're talking kind of generally, the children start to understand this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and they see that kind of storyline in front of them. And so therefore they kind of really want to They want to read more stories. I remember this happening with my own kids, where we went from the board books, where it was a lot of pointing and labeling. Here's an orange. Here's an apple. You know, and that's what they wanted, those words very early on. To suddenly, I want to read the 3 bears. I want to know what happens next. So media that tries to really kind of bring children along on that and show them that story at this mark at 30 months, at 2.5, may really start to engage kids in a way that if that narrative is linear enough and simple enough for them. I mean, it's very hard to kind of have to give you much more than the 3 C's and some of these nuggets, but it's a very multi-layered world out there, and it helps a lot to know what's going on in these different ages.
Yeah.
I have many comments, but I'll hold to. First of all, thank you for writing this book. Can I just talk really loud? I read a good deal of your book, and I thank you because what this book does is it takes all the info bits that we're treating as true information and goes beyond that. So, but that brings up 2 questions. One is all the curriculum we're using to test. What are we testing? What is it really to the kids? What we're testing? Is it concrete things for the educators and for the government? Or is it, 18-month-old children are perfect. You know, they're perfect. They know joy and wonder and anger and you know, they know the whole universe. They have a lovely relationship with the universe. And anything beyond mimicking that sort of joy, I think is a real adult assumption that's not necessarily healthy for children. However, that's your next book, hopefully. The big question is that this book tells parents a lot about assumptions they make from these little info bits that are scaring them and they're manipulating them as consumers. The big question is do you have to turn this into a bunch of info bits and get this information out there?
Yeah, well, thank you, and I hope that I can. I mean, I started to hear a lot more from moms groups and preschools, as I was saying, because parents, I just feel like there was this big gap, and I think that you all in the audience could really help in this way too, in trying to give parents a sense of why this media works and why it doesn't. Being very transparent in the way you create what you do. I mean, I would love to, maybe this is out there and I haven't found it, but I would love to on a website see how some of these shows are created. When were the moments where you realize, oh, that's not working, the 36 months old are not paying attention, or maybe they missed that, we've gone too fast. Little YouTube moments on the websites that kind of show parents, oh wow, they really are putting some thought into this, because I think that what's amazing to me, what I discovered as I looked at this, was that a lot of people who come from early childhood development and developmental psychology you guys are all going into these areas of media production now, and you have a lot of research to bring to what you're producing. And parents out there, they don't know that yet. I mean, they really, I think at this point, are seeing that, oh, we're just being told, they're just trying to get us to sell toys. And absolutely, there are some shows out there that are just trying to get parents to buy toys. But if parents can see and really kind of get a roadmap to, oh wait, but this show has this behind it, and they even tweaked it after episode 7 because they realized that this wasn't working. I mean, I got some of the best insights from hearing from a lot of you about what you realized you were doing wrong and then fixed. And I think that brings a lot of confidence to parents to realize that people are out there, watching out for them.
I'm enjoying seeing all the post-it notes sticking out of your book. You hold it up. I mean, there you go, folks.
I have 23 questions if you have time.
Yeah, well, I wanted to just say that thank you to Jim Levine and being the matchmaker to bring Lisa to Basic Books, the publisher, and because can you imagine trying to write a book when you have 2 kids under age 5? Hello, it's but she has the mind and the just making that match was key. And I see you have the mic.
I have a question. I've read the book quite thoroughly. And,
I imagine.
To me, one of the biggest surprises that I hope you talk about, Lisa, is actually was the context in the home that we don't NPR listener, I was somewhat shocked to think of the harm I might be doing or have done to my kids by having NPR on all the time. And it's not a conservative thing. Can you talk about that a little bit, and also about
NPR will really mess them up.
Rush Limbaugh's okay.
I'm glad you asked that, Jim, because when I've been saying a lot of the time, they say, we need to know what video can do, what video can't do, and what we should be talking about and we aren't. And I just keep feeling like a lot of the baby video debate is missing this whole other realm, which is the world of background television that children are exposed to.
The noise, you talk about the noise.
And it's the noise, and this was eye-opening to me, that when it's not media that's designed for kids, it's not purposeful, they're not necessarily getting anything out of it, then they're really not paying, a lot of 18-month-olds, they're just walking around their couch, pushing their stroller around, they're not paying any attention to the TV, or not even hearing the radio, and so you think as a parent, this isn't, I even say I was kind of proud of the fact that my kids weren't all that interested in TV at 18 months. But what I didn't know, and what I found in doing the research, is that children need moments where they can, the only person they're hearing is mom and dad's voice. And if there's a lot of background chatter, it's very hard for them to filter it out. And a lot of this came out of the University of Maryland and at Purdue. That's where they're doing a lot of this research on what noise does to children and how they have a really hard time dealing with the cocktail party effect, is what it's called. A lot of adults, our ears are developed enough, our brains developed enough, we kind of get around it. For babies and toddlers, it's really tough for them to pull out those little words that they're hearing when there's a lot of stuff going on in the background. So, maybe that's another thing that parents, maybe lesson the parents can learn, just even from the media that they're listening to, that, let's watch thoughtfully, and even with interactive media. If you've got a kind of a computer on that's kind of blaring at you all the time. Let's just be thoughtful about the way we use media with our kids. And when no one's listening, or when you finish listening to enough of NPR, just turn it off and have some moments where you're just interacting with them.
And I want to emphasize that right now on the stage here we have Lisa's book, which is mostly linear media, which doesn't know if you leave the room, if the child walks out, it just keeps going. It's a whole different psychology, although you have a chapter on interactive, than Christie's study, which is about the transaction that takes place between the individual and the medium. And that's a whole different set of questions in psychology. And so we have to understand here, folks, that it's a big sloppy mess. And 10 years ago, it used to be 2 platforms, Mac, Windows, and now we've got Web 2.0, we've got 20 different platforms like Nintendo, all the game consoles. We've got the micro platforms like the Leapster and the V-Smile. And so thinking of these whole things kind of as the material again, but we do need more of that research. You both mentioned the Camera Act with a degree of optimism.
Yes, maybe someone in the audience actually knows more about what that act is going. Do you, Christina?
Or David, maybe you know what?
CAMERA is the Children and Media Research Advancement Act, and it was sponsored by Senators Clinton, Lieberman, Brownback, and Santorum when he was in office. And the purpose of the bill is to get funding to do additional research in interactive media, to find out both the benefits and the harm, to look at both sides of the issue. Sandy Calvert, who's a researcher at Georgetown, was instrumental in getting the bill written, and there was a bit of movement on it a while ago. It seems to have taken a backseat, maybe to the election cycle, I don't know, but it's not dead. It's still out there, and we will be working on trying to get passage for that.
Hi, thanks so much for being here. So as a mom of twins and also as a media producer, I was motivated by the same things that you were, because I had these 2 kids at once, and there were those moments that I was a better mommy if I had a shower. But it seems to me that a lot of the research that's coming out and a lot of the marketing claims that a lot of these products make, and you might talk about this in the book, I haven't gotten there yet, if you do, the thing that's pissing parents off is that they sort of believe that if their child is in front of Mozart, or that they have this sort of content that's supposed to make their baby smarter. And then this research comes out that says, well, in fact, it doesn't really work that way. That whether their child is learning 6 to 8 words less at 18 months, I mean, I can tell you with twins, like my kids weren't talking until 2.5, so I was sure that they were way below the developmental curve of appropriateness. It seems to me that they're sort of reading the headlines and not getting that there really is good media out there. So, how do we as producers sort of say, it's not all crap. There is really good stuff out there that's really developmentally appropriate and good, and sort of get the AAP to sort of back off a little bit. I mean, I happen to be based in Seattle, so I have the lovely Dr. Karastakis in my backyard, and I haven't had any plans on bombing his house or anything like that. But I mean, it's that kind of thing. And how do we communicate to parents that that there's another way? I mean, the New York Times article was a good start. This is a great start.
No, it's a fabulous question, and I think that's really where parents are. Exactly what you're saying. They're just, as I said, I kind of felt like there were these two polar opposite, places, and I was like trying to steer a ship in between them as a mom. I guess I'll say, we kind of just get to the question of content and providing more information to parents about why content works and when it does, and when there can be independent research that's not coming straight out of industry. It's going to be just far better for the parents out there, because they've been hearing, oh, you better be skeptical, the industry's going to tell you whatever it wants to hear. And yet, if we can have a point, let me just give you an example. A study that I found that on Dragon Tales. And it was done with some money from Sesame Workshop, but it was also done with money from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which eventually means it's through the university, through our Ed department and government funded. Therefore, it was very readily available. It was out there to read. And by being able to kind of see something out there, to really see how these studies were created and realize that, boy, they really are thinking about control groups, and they really are trying to get at some real questions, and they really are trying to be careful in their methodology. It gave me, as a parent, much more of a window onto how valid a lot of this research can be. And I also knew when I read that that this was a case of, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I know there's some Sesame Workshop people in here. You have to be corrected, but that was a case where Sesame Workshop has kind of said, here's some money, but we're not going to influence the outcome of this study. We just wanted to see what comes out of it. And it's a scary thing to do, I think, to just say, we just want you guys to do some good research, and we're not going to try to massage the results. But the more that we can do that, the more helpful that's going to be to parents. They're going to have just more confidence in what they're hearing.
Yeah, I would also, parents need information. Unfortunately, or fortunately, parents need the bad information too. They need to know if products are out there claiming to be educational, if they're not educational, or if there's no research showing that they're educational. So having that transparency in the research or the development of the product is very important. But the media companies can also directly provide information to parents through, as far as television and internet content and computer programs go, through the material that they're giving them. So I think Nickelodeon does a wonderful job, Nick Jr., putting, maybe it's Noggin that I watch, putting the educational goals of the program up on the screen beforehand. And my 5-year-old can say metacognition, if I'm explaining it to him, he doesn't really understand what it is. But as a parent, it does me a lot of good to know that whoever created Blue's Clues was very concerned that my child was going to be learning something from their product. And so I think that's very important. Not all media outlets do that, but I think providing that information is very valuable. I think parents will eat it up. I do. But it does have to be based in some kind of research.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment, just an idea that kind of sparked to mind when you were talking about the sweet spot. And now again, you were talking about the labeling, and I worked for Baby First and we did something similar where we had messages explain to a parent how their children should view. But anyway, I was just thinking maybe there could be some sort of rating system or something like that, or some sort of stamp, like a free trade stamp that said, like, this is the age group and then this is the target, and just to have some sort of like consistency to help parents who are viewing, understand in a quick glimpse what's right for their child. That's my comment. And then my question for Christy actually is, one of your overall messages was that for the most part there's no research showing that interactive media is harmful, but then at one point you said there was a little 2 seconds where you said something about creativity maybe being stifled or something like that. Could you just elaborate on that?
Yeah, what I was trying to say was that using the technology itself does not have to be harmful to children, that what it's about is the content. And there have been studies that have shown that some content can stifle creativity if it's not developed in the proper way.
I think that study.
but that it doesn't have to, and I think that's the important message to get, is that and I think you have to view all research this way, that you can't look at one study and come to a general conclusion about all media, or about one medium, or about one program even. You really have to look at a very broad, deep range of research. And so what this was actually saying was that if the content, that the content should be focused on the lesson plan, that it should be developed at the child's developmental level, and then if it has some different criteria like that, that it can actually support their creativity. But that it just really, if they're doing a game, one of the examples was, if there's a program where they're supposed to be learning, where it's like a storybook, and they're supposed to be learning vocabulary words while they're reading it, and there are all kinds of clickables on the screen that they can click on, but the clickables have nothing to do with the vocabulary words or the story or anything, that it distracts kids, it pulls them out of the learning environment, and it's not beneficial to their learning.
We have time for one more?
Oh.
Go ahead.
No, I'm going to be the last. I think what you're saying is so important in terms of giving a context for all of this, but there's a piece that I feel is missing, and the piece is, Christy alluded to it with the idea of scaffolding, and Lisa also talked about it, that you spoke to your child, you asked questions. See, one of the things that I've only experienced a lot of good development, certainly, and I think the people in this room are people who care about this kind of development, who work with educators, who do research and so on. But the parents also have to know how to parlay the media time. It can't just be that you go in the shower. We all know how that's important to get some time. But the real interaction is the scaffolding. The real interaction is taking the product, which is only the beginning of the learning experience, and moving it forward with your child. So the parent, it's not enough to say metacognition on the screen, because I don't know how many parents really know what that means. I think what's important is to understand, and there may need to be many more articles, maybe on your book tours and in your discussions. You can say, look, there's a vocabulary of child development out there that would be helpful for you to understand. There are ways to think about children's growth and timing and understanding. Those categories are important so that people can talk, not only talk the talk, but walk the walk, to really go further with what is out there. I don't think the burden is only on the producer. If they do a great job, that's most important, but then they've got to convey, how do you take it? Because any of us who grew up in television in the days before it wasn't educational. I mean, we're not brain damaged. We somehow managed to go forward from howdy doody or whatever. So I just want to say thank you, and also urge you to go the next level in explaining what development is about.
If I could just add to that, I think that's an excellent point. And I will say that in interviews I do with families, because in addition to the researchers, I try to just talk to a lot of families about their media culture and what was going on in their home. And I found that we're missing kind of this picture too, which is that, especially with little kids, yes, there's times when mom and dad are going to take a shower and they are by themselves maybe in front of a TV screen. But really what's happening is mom's unloading the dishwasher and the TV is within her view, and the baby, well, often in these cases we're talking about, older toddlers, preschoolers, is watching, and mom's kind of watching too and commenting too. And then in those cases, and there's actually some new research from Rachel Barr out of Georgetown on this that's not yet been published, but shows that that really can have a pretty beneficial impact, because parents are remember, see the beach ball? We went to the beach last week. Do you remember going to the beach with Uncle Daniel? And the child's really brought into the media and provide much more context to what they're seeing. And then after the show is off, mom, dad, caregiver are remembering something from the show, or maybe they've got some theme song stuck in their head, and so they're singing to their kids after what they've seen. I think that some of these programs are kind of almost in a sneaky way, parental modeling training programs. I mentioned this about Sesame Beginnings, I write about Sesame Beginnings in my book, and there are some moments in Sesame Beginnings where as a parent you go, let's go play this game with the mirror after we watch this show. So it's so, the lines are blurring, and a lot of the headlines out there don't get at the real context of how children are watching this.
I can say with certainty that we're all members of an involuntary generation of pioneers, and it's whether or not we want to, we have to figure out this puzzle as producers, as parents, for the thing that's most meaningful to all of us, and that's our children. And so the stakes are high, but thank goodness we have master's degrees. So we can figure it out. I can tell you now, folks, that I have a tool I can give my sister, the attorney, so that she can read this, she'll like it, and she'll learn that Piaget is not a watch. So if you haven't read this, and if you know a type A parent with little kids, dangerous combination, this should probably be along with the 100 things to expect, or what to expect when this is kind of a survival guide. And I'd also like to say thank you, David, for pulling this together.
One of the roles that the American Center for Children and Media is trying very hard to play is, those of us who drink coffee know that we've been through 16 rounds of research over the last years of whether coffee is good for you, bad for you, good for you, bad for you. We're trying to play that role with some of the research that's emerging and look at some of the methodology, look at how it fits into the other pieces of research, and communicate. It's so hard for parents today who read, it's a wonderful headline, study says TV makes your kids X. And it's a much more nuanced story than that. In closing, I want to thank all those who made it possible, actually. The Paley Center has been most generous in hosting us here today. Tim Brazier and Basic Books for making sure that we were able to have Lisa here today. Christy and Children Now for getting us the reports, for allowing us to be the place that it's first discussed publicly. Great thanks to Warren Buckleitner for navigating us through the morning. And as always, my biggest thanks go to the companies that support the American Center for Children and Media. Many of my board members are here. At the very least, their companies are represented here today. Our work exists to help you do your best work. So please never hesitate to contact me if you see ways that we can do that. If you see topics we ought to be addressing, ways to follow up on this session today with smaller focused sessions. The American Center's website is finally, at least in a soft release. We still have some bugs we're ironing out, but make a visit to centerforchildrenandmedia.org, and please let us know what's missing, what would be helpful to you, how to make the site useful. There's still food upstairs. There are books upstairs to buy. There are copies of the Children Now report and the Insiders report upstairs. Lisa will be signing books. Christy, I'm sure, would be happy to sign the report. So please come upstairs, continue talking to one another, and thank you very much.
Yeah, and I just realized